Well, my clock says noon, so it is wonderful to welcome all of you to Leading with Purpose, which is a webinar where we are going to hear about the Purpose Playbook and then learn from two people who are role models in living that playbook out in their professional roles. My name is Seth Green, and it's a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Loyola University Chicago's Baumhart Center. For those of you who are not familiar with us, I'll give you the briefest of introductions, and then we're going to go into a really exciting agenda where we're going to hear a strategic overview from Dane Smith, the Managing Director of FSG. And then we're going to dive into case studies with Grace Zunzik, the Chief People and Culture Officer at Chobani, and Ashish Shah, the President and CEO of Dina. And then toward the end, we're going to have questions. So I have some, and then we invite yours as well via the chat function. So with a quick opportunity, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Baumhart Center, and I decided to tell you three things that I thought would be especially relevant for this audience, which is clearly very passionate about purpose in business. The first thing I want you to know is that we at Loyola lead with purpose and truly embrace the playbook that you are going to hear about. One point of pride for us is that the Financial Times has a survey where they look across 250 business schools in the world, and they look at 4 different areas of social purpose. And in 2019, they selected 4 schools to have excellence in 3 or more of those categories. And Loyola University Chicago was one of those alongside UC Berkeley and 2 schools in Europe. And that's because this is a long-standing leadership role for Loyola dating back to Raymond Baumhart, who is not only our longest-serving president, but was also the author of a book, The Honest Profit, that really began this field of purpose and profit as a discipline. One of the ways that we show that purpose is that Loyola has the first program of its type in the country, an MBA that is cohort-based, that is exclusively at the intersection of purpose and profit. And here you see the incredible 11 leaders that are part of our first cohort. And I'm thrilled to say that we are now far along in the rising leaders that will be part of our second cohort. And we are adding to these incredible people another incredible group next year. And ultimately, what this group is able to do is look at business with a new lens. Instead of thinking about how do you build brands just for the purpose of profit and maybe reinforce stereotypes, they're constantly looking at how do I build a brand that defies stereotypes? How do I create a sustainable financial plan? The final area that we are really proud of, and that is very relevant to today because we have one of our honorees, is that we are raising the standards for business. And one way that we do that is through an annual award where we look across the country for who we believe are truly the innovators in looking at business with a purpose and profit lens. And we were really proud this year to have Chobani, Indigo, and Bain Capital Double Impact. And one of these will be featured today. And so we are enormously grateful to Grace for sharing her insights as a company that we believe is at the very forefront of this movement. So having shared a little bit about what we do, it's now my pleasure to turn it over to Dane Smith, the Managing Director of FSG. FSG is a consultancy that is truly at the intersection of purpose and profit, and their Creating Shared Value initiative is widely respected by companies who are trying to integrate greater purpose into their efforts. Their Purpose Playbook is one that we believe every executive should know about, and so we were really excited to present it today. Dane, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Seth. Really delighted to be here with you today. I'm so inspired by everything that you all are doing at the Baumhart Center, and so delighted to be a small part of this exciting community that is working so hard to explore the connection between purpose and profit. So as Seth mentioned, I'm a managing director at FSG. I lead our corporate practice. FSG is a nonprofit mission-driven consulting firm founded by Professor Michael Porter and Mark Kramer a couple of decades ago to find new ways to create social impact. And this Purpose Playbook is something that our Shared Value Initiative and FSG have put together to create a tool that is available for everyone for free to explore how they can more clearly understand the connection between purpose and profit. So I'm gonna start sharing my slides here. So something that I think that probably everybody on the phone is aware of is that everybody seems to be falling in love with this idea of purpose. The notion that companies can represent something more than just profit. And when it's done well, it's energizing, it's inspiring. It can create a shared reason for being for all members of a company. But we at FSG believe that it's not enough to simply announce that a company has a purpose. It's not enough to simply have a purpose statement that you communicate and publicize. You really need to clearly articulate the link between your culture, your business strategy, and what you're trying to achieve out there in the world. We define purpose as being a company's reason for being that simultaneously helps solve a social problem and creates a significant financial value for the company. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we actually consider it to be quite integral for there to be a link between purpose and profit. It's more than just what a company is doing around its philanthropy and its corporate social responsibility and its sustainability. So we know that people all around are falling in love with this idea of purpose. Customers want to buy products from companies that are doing something to make the world a better place. Employees are seeking out a place to work where they can do something more than just punch the clock. Communities are looking for companies to contribute and be part of what they're trying to do to make their environment more sustainable and prosperous for everyone who lives there. And now even investors are starting to recognize that they're looking for something more, that they want companies to represent something more. And what we're seeing is that some companies are starting to be rewarded for their purpose. For the last several years, FSG and the Shared Value Initiative have had a partnership with Fortune to identify 50 companies that are changing the world through their business model. And as many of you on the phone know, one of the most successful investors in the world, Larry Fink, who's the chairman and CEO of BlackRock, has said that without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. So there's a growing recognition that this is critical for stakeholders. What we've discovered, though, is that even though there's a growing recognition of the importance of purpose, there's still a lot of misunderstanding about what it means. Recent research that Harvard has done has indicated that somewhere between 80 and 90% of CEOs believe that purpose is critical. They believe that it's important to motivate their employees. It's critical for building customer loyalty and customer engagement. It's critical for making sure that the broader society understands what a company is about. Yet despite despite that over 4 out of 5 CEOs say that this is critical, roughly only a third of these same CEOs believe that there is good integration between their business model and the purpose that they are trying to achieve. So what this means is that CEOs and business leaders realize that it's important, but they don't really know how to do it. They haven't figured out how they can create that connection between purpose and profit. We at FSG believe that in order for a company to be purpose-led, it needs to use a portfolio of practices. It needs to be evident in its philanthropy. It needs to be evident in the way that it treats its employees. It needs to be evident in the way that it works with suppliers, the way it thinks about diversity and equity and inclusion. It needs to be evident in its values and its norms. All that being said, we believe that the most powerful practice that a company can use to achieve its purpose at scale is shared value. For us, shared value are strategies that allow companies to help solve social or environmental problems in a way that increases the competitiveness of the company. And by having that close link between profit and purpose, it helps drive innovation because companies are looking to scale their efforts, and it helps to create a sustainable future. So as our co-founders, Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, have said, shared value is not just social responsibility or philanthropy or even sustainability, but it really represents a new way to achieve economic success. Now, in order to, and I should say here right now that at a time of the crisis that we are all confronting with COVID, the need for companies to find that purpose or to find their link to society becomes even more evident. If before some companies could say, well, these problems that are going on around us are externalities. They are things that the government should take care of. They are things that philanthropy should take care of. They are things that the church or foundation should take care of. Now, none of us can ignore the notion that a society that is not healthy, that a society that is not prospering is going to impact companies' bottom lines. And so the evidence of this is even more clear. So in order to help clarify to companies how they can create that connection between purpose and profit, 2 weeks ago, we launched a purpose playbook. And this is, as I mentioned before, this is a free resource. If you go to sharedvalue.org, which is the site for the Shared Value Initiative, you can have full access to the playbook for anyone. And this is designed to help companies go through a process of really understanding where the opportunity is and how they can build a purpose and build a strategy to make this work. And I want to take you through this playbook really quickly right now. So right at the center, there is this idea of purpose. And I said that I defined purpose before, but I want to be a little bit more explicit about what purpose means to us. So for FSG and the Shared Value Initiative, a purpose needs to be significant, it needs to be authentic, it needs to be profitable, and it needs to be serious. What do we mean by significant? For us, for a purpose to be significant, it means that a company has to be dedicated to helping to solve a social or environmental problem. It might be one of the SDGs, or it might be a local problem that's in the intersection with the company's business. But it needs to be committed to helping to solve that problem. Second, the purpose needs to be authentic. This can't be something that's invented as part of a communications exercise. It has to be something that's part of the DNA of a company, and it has to be evident in the decisions that a company makes, even challenging decisions about how it uses its financial resources. The third thing, as I explained before, as I was talking about shared value, purpose needs to be profitable. If the purpose is not integrated into the company's business model, there will be severe limitations in terms of what the company can do. If it's not integrated into the way that the company thinks about developing products or services, the way it thinks about hiring and promoting talent, the way it thinks about working in its community, if there's not clarity about how the company will profit through its purpose, then it will only ever be a small part of what the company represents. And then the fourth thing is that the purpose needs to be serious. That means that the company needs to hold itself accountable, even up to the board of directors level. Everybody needs to recognize that performance management is connected to how well the company is doing in terms of executing on its purpose. So at the center of the purpose playbook is the notion that that needs to be clear with the leadership of the company. The second element that's part of the purpose playbook is culture. So what we've seen over and over again, and you're gonna hear more about this from Grace and Ashish in a few moments, I'm sure, is that if a company's culture does not support what it's doing in purpose, it's not going to succeed. So if even if the senior leadership believes in its purpose, if middle management believes that the problems of society are not connected to how well the company is going to do, then the company will not succeed in its purpose. If the company doesn't have a culture that encourages exploring the connections between social problems and the success of the business model, then it's not going to succeed. So a company needs to be devoted to nurturing that culture that allows the purpose to succeed. The third element of the purpose playbook has to do with strategy. So this has to do with the choices that a company is making, whether it's identifying the opportunities where it can succeed, noting the ways that it differentiates itself from its competition, and how it can make the choices that will allow the purpose to come to life. The fourth element has to do with operations. Obviously, the way that the company thinks about managing its systems, the way it thinks about collaborating with others, the way it sets itself up to measure its performance and report on its performance. And then the fifth element has to do with people. So how is a company looking to hire, develop, promote, and reward the people that are critical for succeeding in its purpose? All these last three elements, strategy, operations, and people, each have three practices that where we elaborate on how the company can develop its purpose and how it can integrate it into its business operation. So just let me tell you a little bit more about how the playbook works. So as mentioned before, it's focused on how companies can lead with purpose by developing their shared value strategies. It's been developed in partnership with dozens of experienced practitioners, people that work at companies that are leading with purpose. There's a guide and a workbook with company examples that are designed for the practitioners. There's a quick assessment to help the user understand how to use the playbook, to understand where it is, where the company is on its purpose journey. And there's an in-depth assessment to help companies assess where they're making progress. So just to give you a little bit more on the contents of the playbook itself, you see for each one of these 9 practices that we have definitions for the practices, we have examples of things that are happening in the real world with links that users can follow to learn more about it, and a workbook of exercises that the can use as they take themselves through this process. So you see a description for each practice of what good looks like. What does it mean when a company is far along, for example, in innovating to create scale around its purpose? And then there are examples of companies that are innovating for scale. Some of the examples that we would cite of companies that are putting this into practice, obviously you're going to hear from Chobani and Dina in a few moments, but you have the example of PayPal, when it identifies the connection between its business strategy, its business model, and the needs that the underbanked and the underserved around the world have. So ways that it integrates new product offerings into its business model to create greater social impact. Or in the space around measuring and reporting, which is part of the operations piece of the purpose playbook. You see what Nestle has done to demonstrate and model new measuring reports looking at both the social impact and the business impact of its purpose efforts, in particular its Global Youth Initiative, and bringing together others to push that further. And then in the people part of things, you have an example such as the National Australia Bank, part of the Shared Value Project in Australia, which has training for all of its bankers to consider both the social impact and the financial impact of how it works with customers. So you have examples that you can use. And then we also provide exercises for companies to go through this process on their own to help them further everything that they're doing around the purpose playbook. As I mentioned before, there are dozens of companies that have helped us in developing this. Real practitioners who tested the exercises, who tested the playbook, and have given us great insights on how to go further. And indeed, there's an opportunity for you, by joining the Shared Value Initiative, to be part of this community of companies that's exploring further. For those companies that are interested in doing an even greater deep dive into how to use the purpose playbook, we are also launching Purpose Playbook learning cohorts, where companies can learn with a group of 5 to 7 other companies how to go through the Purpose Playbook. And the idea here is that there would be 4 virtual interactive workshops focusing on an overview of purpose, the connection to leadership and culture, and then additional sessions on strategy, operations, and people, and then 1 individual company coaching session. These sessions are designed to start in the coming weeks, and we urge companies to have a couple of members to participate so that they can go through that learning process together. So I want to leave time for Grace and Ashish to share their examples of how they are making purpose come to life at their companies. But want to close with a call to action here. For too long, we've heard companies talk about the importance of purpose. We've seen them launch their purpose statements to claim that they are trying to do something that's meaningful for the world, but we don't see a real connection between their business strategy and their purpose. We don't see the purpose integrated and manifest in the culture of the company. So please join this movement of companies that are trying to make it more meaningful for their employees, for their customers, and for their communities. Please take a look at the Purpose Playbook and make the purpose at your own companies as meaningful as it can be. Thanks very much. Back to you, Seth.
Thank you so much, Dane. And I want to just say how inspiring your work is to really move purpose forward. I also just want to acknowledge that on that slide that you showed of the participants so far in your effort, a number of the people that are in this work already are here as listeners, and I just want to acknowledge them. I saw Edelman up there as a company that is part of this. John Edelman, the managing director of Edelman, is joining us right now. And then I saw Harvard Business School, and we are thrilled to have Harvard's Sustainable Business Strategy program sharing this invitation and a part of this as well. And now it's my pleasure to introduce someone who is truly at the center of everything that Dane just described at Chobani. Grace Zunzik is the Chief People and Culture Officer. And if you thought about that map that Dane showed, he started by saying it needs to be significant, authentic, profitable, and serious. Everyone who has looked at Chobani and its original founder and CEO, Hamdi Ulukaya, is very familiar with how he fits each of those and why he started the company. But then if you looked at that next layer, you need to have it in your culture, and you need to have it in your people, strategy, and operations. And so Grace, leading both people and culture, and then on the executive team where she is part of the decision-making on strategy and ops, is literally at the center of ensuring that that intention of purpose that Chobani started with continues and scales with the company's success. And so Grace, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Seth. And thank you, Dane and Ashish. It's awesome to be with you today. Ashish, I have a birthday next week, so as we talk about this aging thing, I might give you a call, have a little conversation. And Dane, I think Hamdi would have loved to have your playbook 10 years ago. So it's never too late, but a lot of companies will benefit from the guidance and the structure that you're bringing to such a complex but important topic. So Chobani, I've been with the company now for 8 years. It has a great story. I think we'll hold on this slide for a moment, Seth, and I'll tee it up. But Chobani means shepherd, for those of you who don't know the definition of the word. And so we'll take care of the flock, if you will, the metaphorical flock. But as much as we're shepherds here at the company and we're known for the societal good that the company does, we're also warriors, as Hamdi would say. So like most businesses, we want to crush our competition and we want to win. And it's an interesting thought. And I think, Dane, I love what FSG has said about the seriousness of shared value in purpose-driven organizations, because companies have long thought about their reason to be as to generate profit versus to have a societal problem to solve. But companies can do both. They can be shepherds and they can be warriors, and it's just simply a do-good company that wants to win. And I think that FSG has really thought about that in its philosophy and its design of what shared value is all about, what leading with purpose is all about. So our founder and CEO, Hamdi Ulukaya, who Seth had mentioned, laid a very strong foundation for Chobani from the very beginning. And now you see leaders like myself, Peter, Kathy, Michelle, Prague, my colleagues at the company, building upon a foundation where it's so clear why the company exists that it manifests itself in all the different decisions that are made by leaders across the whole organization, and not just our executive leadership team, but folks in managerial positions across the country, on a retail execution team, in the plants, really everywhere. There's a strong connection between role and the purpose of the organization. And that's because of a lot of the decisions that were made early on. So for the younger companies on the call today, what I've learned from being at Chobani for 8 years is that what you do first matters. So your initial impact doesn't have to be huge. It just needs to be real, and it needs to have significance over time. I think it's really important for younger companies to understand as you're designing, your mission and your vision and how you're articulating that to the people that you're bringing on board. So as purpose and shared value have taken off these themes, and we can go to the next slide, Seth, from the business roundtable to FSG all the way down, I think most companies will want to get on board and figure out how to deploy their purpose. But doing things genuinely will matter more than ever, because consumers are smart, people are smart, and they will know when your purpose is self-serving or inauthentic. And so you got to think about that as well. You have to think long and hard about the impact you want your organization to make in the world, and why, and what feels most natural, and what excites your employees and your customers and your suppliers to get behind that. And when it's deployed well, your shared value and your purpose, consumers will see the impact of it changing behavior and outcomes, whether locally or at scale. So Hamdi, being so insightful, thought about this many years ago in our founding mission of better food for more people. Today we're broader than a yogurt company. We make non-dairy products. Some of you may have tried our oat milk or our dairy creamers or our non-dairy yogurt products. But the concept was that people have great taste, they just need better options. And access to better food, all grounded in the next slide, Seth, of delicious, nutritious, natural, and accessible products. We were looking at our competition, our set in CPG and the yogurt sector is having artificial ingredients, not a lot of protein, a lot of sugar, and just offering something that was better for people. But doing all of this good, more behind the scenes, really more for the culture and the employees and the local communities that we were serving, both very rural, one in upstate New York and one in Twin Falls, Idaho. So in the next slide, you'll see Hamdi talking about this concept that we're bringing something that consumers wanted to market. They just didn't either know how to articulate that need, but it was grounded in something that we would make money doing. We would make money in a category that was competitive, that was very large. I think the size of the yogurt market today, if you include food service, is probably $8 to $9 billion market. Good margins, good profitability, meeting a need, and grounding our purpose in that need, but having a higher order calling of why. Right, and so really taking the time to unpack that and answer that question, both for our employees and for our customers and suppliers. So on the next slide, as the company's matured and evolved, as we celebrated our 10-year anniversary back in 2018, we thought about this concept of wellness and what it means for Chobani, and this evolution of better food for more people. People have great taste, they just need better options, to more foundational pillars for the business that we could build our shared value over time across a lot of different markets, and markets beyond the yogurt category as we are today, performing and competing in other markets. So looking at nutritional wellness, social wellness, and environmental wellness. In my role at the company, I spend a lot of time on social wellness. This is about the work that we do for our employees in the rural communities that we serve. We also have a corporate office in New York City, a small shared service office in upstate New York, and looking at the community impact that we can have, both at a large scale and sometimes at smaller scale, and really connecting those dots, in the social wellness area. So we make yogurt, but our business is wellness, and that has really elevated the ways that we think about the impact that we want to have. For example, when the school debt, the school lunch program debt issue arose in Rhode Island, the company understood that, well, our purpose is to bring better food to more people. our shared values to meet that need across all the different dimensions, all the different stakeholders, this would be an appropriate place for Chobani to have impact by paying off the debts of the kids that couldn't afford the school lunches. So it all connects. And you can do this in so many different ways as a company. You could be well out of the yogurt category in another segment and see that societal need that's just the perfect one for you to respond to, because it's the most authentic and the most aligned to your reason for being, your reason for existence as a company. So the next slide, giving back the Chobani way, I wanted to talk a bit about the work that we've been doing through this very unprecedented time, a time that's bringing a lot of hardship to a lot of people across our country, a lot of unemployment. I'm sure folks are watching those numbers uptick every week, maybe in the city that you live in or the county that you live in. And when we thought about the most authentic way for Chobani to respond, we went back to that purpose again that we had from the very beginning of better food for more people. So in the next slide, you'll see a recap of some of the work that we're doing under a program called Chobani Pantry that Handi announced on his LinkedIn page a few weeks ago. But getting our product to food banks across the country with deliveries to schools and hospitals, food pantries, nursing homes, first responders, Meals on Wheels. We branded our trucks so that when they drive across the country, it's a commercial decision, why not? You know, you've got free advertising, but guess where that truck's going? That truck's going to a food bank. It's a win-win, right? For Chobani and for the food bank. The Truck a Day program, we've been taking a truck a day from our plants in upstate New York and in Twin Falls to go directly to a food bank, bringing that product there that's fresh. That's an interesting nuance in the food sector for those of you who are familiar. A lot of product that's on its way to expiration is typically donated to a food bank. You'll also see a lot of unbranded products donated to a food bank. So we wanted to bring not only the freshest product that we have, but also the strength of our brand to families that are looking for access at food banks to feed their own families. During this time, advertising is for us a little, it's interesting because we don't want to be in your face, go buy Chobani, go buy our products. So instead, we made the decision to donate the media hours that we had of Feeding America. We felt that their message might be more important than ours right now. And instead, we can redirect our strategy to promotions in the store to make the product cheaper for a couple weeks so that families can afford it, right? So really those small choices that add up and keep building and building to really elevate your purpose, make it real, make it feel authentic to your people, your customers, and your consumers. The Chobani Pantry, this is an interesting one. In New York City, we operate a small cafe. It's a place to go get lunch, grab a coffee, grab a yogurt. We've repurposed that location for people to come by a few days a week to pick up free product from Chobani, from our oat milk to our coffee creamers to our yogurt. It was a way to give meaning and give value to that location instead of shutting it down and we'll reopen at some point in time. So very complex, a lot of work to keep people safe there, a lot of work to do it right. But again, all building with that purpose, philosophy that the company has. A few other things that are here, we've expanded our retail execution team. We're hiring now because we can. We know a lot of businesses can't hire right now. We feel for those companies. Some companies are going through very difficult periods of transition. And we saw an opportunity to expand our team and to bring more resources into the grocery stores to support our retail customers and keeping the stocks the shelves stocked while so many people are grocery shopping and staying at home and just procuring more and buying more each week. We found ways for our employees to get involved in our efforts to be a shepherd program, keeping their safety at the forefront of our strategies there, but giving them an opportunity to get involved. I think that's really important. The purpose and the mission can't just be talking points and, the executive team tells everybody what we're doing each week. You got to find windows of opportunity for people to get engaged and get involved if they'd like to. And we've also gotten very involved at the state level with some initiatives in New York State in particular. So the next slide, this is Handi launching the Chobani Pantry program again. We've been very blessed to have a founder that, wrote the book on purpose in many ways, and just leveraging his voice, using that as our platform to spread the word on the good work that we're doing across the country. This is example, that map. Those are stars or locations where those trucks have been going from our plants to deliver product to food banks across America. Some beautiful pictures of our employees volunteering. We've done a bunch of work with veterans. We've done a bunch of work with the military during this time, a lot of military families getting involved in our programming. That picture up there is very close to where I live. I live right outside of New Rochelle, where a lot of the news first came out on COVID-19. My kids go to school in New Rochelle, actually, and that's doing some work with the National Guard. We did some work at West Point last week as well. And on the next slide, you'll see New York efforts. Chobani's always had a philosophy too to support our own first, in a way, like looking at our own backyard. So a lot of the community work that we do is very close to the plants. It's in New York State and Idaho. That's where our people are. That's where they can get involved. They can see the impact of those efforts. And it just so happens that there's a tremendous amount of need in the communities where we own and operate our manufacturing facilities. So you see some photos there from New York, and on the next slide, some photos from Idaho as well. And I think that might be it for slides. Here's the New York City pantry. And this was, very, again, and I think one of the really interesting things about purpose, when you're grounded in purpose and shared value, you can really push the limits of your creativity too. You can innovate in purpose. You can innovate and become more creative and use this time to think about, well, what do people most need and what can we do and how can we solve a problem and how can we do it to help the brand and how can we do it to grow awareness of why we exist. So it's all connected. It's doing good for good's sake, yes, but it's also doing good with a bigger aim in mind of growing our business, growing our brand awareness, right? There's that connectivity. We're in business. We're here to make profit. We are here to grow. But at the same time, there are ways to do it that are consistent with the fundamental values for your reason to be. And I think that's all I had on Chobani, Seth, but thanks so much for the opportunity today to present to this awesome audience. I've loved reading the chat box, looking at all the great people who are with us today, and looking forward to hearing from Ashish next.
Well, thank you so much, Grace. You can certainly see why we were eager to have Chobani featured in this. I really think that what you have done is written the playbook by doing. And so what a wonderful compliment to the kind of formal introduction that Dane provided of how companies do it to actually see, a true model in action. And one thing that we really wanted to do was, to your point about setting up from the start with purpose, is offer a second case study that really gave you a chance to see what this looks like early on in a founder's eyes. Ashish is, I believe it's 4 or 5 years into this incredible entrepreneurial journey with Dina. He is someone that started it with a purpose and has maintained that sense through his own efforts as a CEO in building culture. And so, Ashish, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Seth, and Grace. Great job with the slides. As I was going through mine, my daughter's a huge Chobani fan. She actually loves the Chobani flips, and it's a part of her routine. And so I think she's in the other room right now, but I think she would love to be here. So I'll have to show her the recording. But congrats on all of your success. Dina is a healthcare technology company, and I'll get to why we ultimately started the business, but. My career really started in healthcare about 20 years ago, after 9/11, actually. So another sort of critical moment in history where I started to spend a lot of time with health insurance companies on how to leverage data and technology to really make healthcare more affordable at that time. And through the course of my career, I ended up at a previous venture that helped connect hospitals to primary care physicians and really enable large-scale data sharing around lab test results, discharge summaries, things along those lines that were typically sent via mail, US mail, the old-fashioned way, or fax, and we were entering into an industry that was just getting ready to electronically share that information. I share all of that with you because after this last venture ultimately moved through an acquisition, 6 months after that, my dad suddenly passed away. And that's really the founding story around Dina. In that moment, having experienced some good professional success, it was a little bit of a humbling moment for me to see that all the work that we had done connecting 1,300 hospitals to hundreds of thousands of healthcare professionals, particularly in primary care, was great. But in my father's case, it really wasn't going to address sort of his concerns. And he was a senior. He was being seen by in-home care professionals. He was in and out of senior centers. And when we spent time with him, when we spent time with the caregivers after he passed, we learned that these people had deep, meaningful insights around his decline, but weren't necessarily engaged in a way that would allow the healthcare continuum to engage and do the proactive things to help him live his very best life. Long story short, having reflected on that experience, myself and my partner, David Coyle, both looked at this situation. He was dealing with a similar situation with his mother, and we felt that there had to be a better way. Now, we both agreed on that. It felt like common sense to the two of us. But we did more and more research, and we found that 10,000 people are turning 65 years old a day. Today in the US, there's roughly about 30 million seniors, those who are 65 plus. And by 2045, it will be north of 80 million. So in terms of the number of seniors who have a number of needs that need to be proactively managed, it's growing and not shrinking. And more people are going to end up in a situation like mine or David's in his particular case. And so we decided to start Dina. Seth, if you advance the next slide here. And our vision, which I wanted to share with all of you, is important because I think we've come back to this over the years on how do we invest and what do we do, much to what Dane took us through with the Purpose Playbook, but it's to really empower everyone in the world to age how and where they want. And the core focus of this business started with seniors, but as we've sort of evolved over time, we found that it's really anyone with complex needs or underlying complex medical needs. And so it's the scope of the company has really evolved from seniors to those who are in vulnerable communities to now, right now, in present day COVID-19 pandemic era, really helping all people who are really struggling to manage through this particular moment. So let me share a little bit more about our company. You know, as Seth mentioned, was founded in 2015. We're currently actively deployed in 17 states. Many of those states really went up recently as we extended our solution in response to COVID-19. I'll share a little bit more about that. But we're a technology company, and really we're solving two main problems. The first main problem is, how do you bring together a community of caregivers at every level of care, whether it be hospitals, families, the individual themselves, home care workers, and bring them together and allow them to better manage the care for an individual to help them live their very best life. The second problem that we really focus on is, how do we use that connectivity to better share information about how somebody is doing and what their needs are, and use data and AI to really help somebody age on their terms, typically where they want, which is in the home. And unfortunately in the US and in other parts of the world, far too many people end up unexpectedly in hospitals or emergency departments or nursing homes, places where they don't want to be. And we think that there's a better way to that. And that's really what's been driving our company on a daily basis now for 5 years. We're fortunate that we've been supported by investors like Chicago Ventures and other fine groups that really believe in our mission and have supported the development of a company and a business model that not only creates great value financially, but also makes a massive impact in the world, and a problem that all of us will touch and experience in one way, shape, or form as time goes on. Seth, if you move to the next slide. So just you want to try to put this into a little bit of a picture for you. It's not uncommon if you've ever had a loved one or yourself that's gone into a hospital. Perhaps it's an elderly person who's fallen, had a fracture, hip fracture, and needed a non-elective surgery or a hip replacement. That journey home is often very difficult. And so one of the things that we'll do is oftentimes take a hospital care coordination team and connect them to rehab centers and home care workers and families, and bring them together into a digital community that feels a lot like a LinkedIn or a Facebook, where it's very easy to work together to help somebody recover in time. The second thing that we'll do, Seth, if you advance, is as all that communication is taking place, we're able to unlock insights to help people age on their terms in their home, in their recovery. So who's struggling with mental or behavioral health, who perhaps need support around activities of daily living, perhaps things like bathing, grooming, meal preparation, things that are not medical in nature, but have a huge impact on how somebody lives their life. These are insights that are often buried and hard to surface to the top level. We find those types of insights. And then address issues around health and safety. Sometimes homes need to be modified. And we know that for seniors in particular, fall risk with fracture is a high predictor of people who ultimately pass away. And so we try to identify moments like that and drive those types of interventions. And then in some cases, prepare for life transitions, those who may need to eventually transition to palliative or hospice-based care. These are the types of insights that our platform uncovers when we bring a community of caregivers together. I think when we present this vision to many, I think generally speaking, everyone is on board. The hard part and the challenge for us over the years is how do we build a business around this? And how do we do it in a way that ultimately allows us to continue to stay on course on the mission and executing against the vision? And I wanted to share this slide with you because our whole model is driven around, yes, connecting caregivers, but secondly, creating those insights that allow people to age on their terms. And we know that when we do that, we help our buyers, who are ultimately health systems and health plans, do two things that are really important to them. One, we help them achieve the highest quality that they're really in pursuit of. And a lot of that drives their business model in terms of how they're reimbursed for their services that they provide, or how they attract new patients or members into their business. And then the second is, we know that accessing care in the home and community is far less expensive than unnecessary trips to the ER or to the hospital. And so our ability to sort of optimize that total cost of care at a time where we have a large number of seniors consuming a heavy amount of unnecessary healthcare services is not necessarily sustainable. And so being able to bring that cost in line allows everyone to win. Our whole business model is about taking care of people, creating a window into what their needs are in their home and community. And when we do that, our buyers ultimately prosper. When they do, it allows us to continue on to the mission. This took us some time, and it's nice to be able to come on this webinar and share this story. But as a young entrepreneurial company, it takes iteration. So my guidance to all of you is, if you're in our situation, it may not be crystal clear when you start, but if you're centered in purpose, it allows you to kind of evolve and iterate to a point where you arrive at something along these lines. We've been fortunate that we've been able to build our business by finding folks who are ultimately aligned with our vision. And that's super critical in the early formative years. So we're working with Dr. Klasko and Jefferson Health in the greater Philadelphia market. We're working with David Beata, the leading provider of home-based services across 22 states. We're working with really remarkable people, and that has helped us really launch our business in a meaningful way. The hard part in this is building the business model, of course, but secondly, finding great people. Nobody does it by themselves, and I think we focused very early on our values. We wanted to identify people who saw the world the same way we did, that understood the problem, had either experienced it for themselves or had been in contact with somebody who had gone through a similar journey. And so we really prioritize trust in everything that we do. Not only we're in the business of healthcare and data, we can't really misuse that in any way, shape, or form. And so trust is at the top of our list. Diversity, not only in race, gender, and ethnicity, but background and experience, school of thought, that was very critical. And so early on when we were building our team, we really looked for people from outside of our typical sphere that we had worked within to really push us to think differently and more dynamically. And so that's continued to be a great asset for us. Commitment, far too often people have signed up for solving a big problem and haven't seen it through. And we certainly make it a big point to put big goals on the board, break it down to small pieces, and march our way to it. And then continuous learning. We think a big part of our value add here is sharing our ideas. Yes, we're in a competitive space. Yes, there are businesses who are trying to do similar things. But we think by sharing, we move the entire industry forward, and competition brings out the best in everyone. So we're on this journey around continuous learning. And these are things that ultimately highly talented people have opted into our organization to say, I want to work on this mission. I believe in the same values that you have. And that's allowed us to make a great deal of progress. I want to touch on that progress a little bit, Seth, if we move on to the previous slide here around COVID-19. So 9 weeks ago now, the pandemic really started to hit the US in a major way. And this is actually our slide from our company update. As a young company, we had to make some tough decisions very quickly. And so our team was able to come together and decide on three things. One, we're going to protect the health and safety of all those within the company. Secondly, we're going to do everything we can to be part of the solution by leaning into all of our current customer relationships. And then the third thing was we're going to conserve financial resources. Those three things have helped us get through a very difficult period over the last 9 weeks. And what we've been able to achieve has been fairly remarkable. We've been able to take our model, which really focused on helping seniors age in their home, and really be able to extend it to the next sort of challenge in the space, which was protecting caregivers. Our customers came to us and said that they were very worried about their home-based employees going in and out of homes and potentially infecting their clients who are seniors, but also spreading that from home to home. This started with 150 people in the state of New York. One Sunday afternoon, we quickly extended our platform to proactively engage, coach, and screen caregivers and help keep them safe and well. Fast forward 8 weeks, that solution is now in 20 states across the country. We've been able to not only help our current customers, but we've brought on new customers as well. There is no way that we're able to execute on something like that if we don't have people who understand our vision and mission, who are not aligned with our values, and understand what we stand for, which is helping people live their very best life on their terms. And so our ability to sort of move at that speed is fully empowered by what Dane has introduced here with the Purpose Playbook. And we live it here every day. We're a much smaller organization than many of you that are on the webinar. But I have confidence that we can grow to that size and scale, just given the way we've been able to execute here over the last 8 to 9 weeks. So Seth, thank you for the opportunity to share our story.
Well, thank you. I mean, for all of the, truly essential work that you've done during this moment. I mean, I think about the heroes that are in healthcare and, your ability to empower them. So we have about 5 minutes, which is awesome because people with purpose are quick with their wit, in my experience. And so we will make this a power round question. And I'm going to combine a few ideas that have come into the chat function. And so what we've heard from the chat is people really want to know, how do you pivot to purpose if you're not already a purpose-led company? And secondly, how do you think about purpose if you're making tough choices among COVID-19? And so maybe if it's possible, Dane, we can start with any insights you have globally. And then Grace and Ashish, I know this is not necessarily your exact company situation, but as practitioners who have led with purpose and have been through many different iterations, I'm curious if you could just offer tips to others that are out there on that high level set of questions. So Dane, can we come to you first?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, Seth. And thanks to both Grace and Ashish for your very specific examples of how your companies are leading with purpose. It's very inspiring. What I would say is there are actually a number of companies who've made this pivot, established companies that have changed their strategies to be more, to embed purpose in their business model. You might look at Enel, the Italian energy company that's committed to being focused on green energy. You can look at Danone, who's, sorry to mention a competitor.
It's okay.
They made an important pivot to be more focused on health and made some hard decisions along the way. You can look at BD, Becton Dickinson, the medical device company that's really embedded purpose in what they're trying to do to create safety. You can look at Inditex, the global clothing company that's really embedded purpose in their supply chain. The critical thing is for companies to commit themselves to understand how social problems and environmental problems around them are affecting their customers, their communities, and their employees. But companies need to recognize that oftentimes they are blind to these problems, especially business leaders that are used to thinking about their business model in a particular way. And so they have to open themselves up to input from employees, from NGOs, from suppliers, from competitors, from what sometimes you might see as being unusual suspects who can be partners for them, and they really need to commit to that. I want to address the question about what is happening within COVID-19 right now for companies to commit themselves more to purpose. I mean, we've heard examples from Grace and Ashish, and we're seeing examples of some small companies that are doing really interesting things. I'll cite Taraluci and Ivino, which is a restaurant chain, or not chain, but has 5 restaurants in New York that's committed to working on feeding the front lines, and has really enlisted over a dozen additional restaurants, and now they provided 100,000 meals to frontline workers. And this has allowed them to keep their employees working, keep their restaurants open, and by being really in tune to the challenges that their customers are facing and their employees are facing. But really, the jury is still out about what companies are going to do, because if they're going to be purpose-led during the time of the COVID-19 crisis, oftentimes that means that they're not going to be able to maximize short-term profit. They need to think about maximizing their long-term competitiveness. And so what we're going to be looking at, what FSG is going to be looking at, and the Shared Value Initiative is going to be looking at, is, you know, do the companies that are looking at medical solutions, whether it be pharma companies, medical device companies, companies that are making the equipment, are they not only meeting the needs of the market, but are they thinking about how they can systemically help address the problem that many in the population don't have access to medicine, do not have access to equipment, and can they help solve that social problem that is confronting so many? What are banks going to do? Are they going to be in protect mode, protecting their financial resources? And there's a good reason for them to think about doing this at a time with great uncertainty. Or are they going to think about long-term, how they can deepen their relationships with their customers and their clients, and try to create a more prosperous community where they can succeed in the long term? So that's what we're going to be looking at, but the jury's still out on what companies are going to do during COVID-19.
Grace, can we turn to you as someone who has lived this for your advice for folks out there that are thinking about making the pivot to purpose?
Yeah, I think for larger companies, and yes, Dane, our competition is significantly larger than us, and I won't speak ill of them here, but it's very tempting to set up a committee, hire a department, hire someone with it in their title, write a paper, put it on the website, and then it's like, so the big, and Dane got at this in his response, and I think it's spot on, is that the question that needs to be asked within the organization was, if we weren't overly focused on profit, how would we solve this problem? If we weren't overly focused on profit, what would we do differently to address this opportunity or this issue? And through that, have an innovative discussion and a much more creative discussion, and then from there, figure out a path to profit. I think that is the hardest thing for larger companies to do, in part because many of them are public companies and they deal with short-term shareholder expectations and quarterly, shareholder meetings, and it's a challenging thing. But that is the fundamental question to be asking, and it needs to come from the top down and be embedded within the culture. So I would answer that. I think strong leadership at the top, it all starts from the top. That expression comes up all the time, especially in business schools, and it's very true. But there needs to be a culture shift within the organization that just looks at the ways in which problems are being solved and asks different questions.
Thank you. And Ashish, our final word here.
I think Dane and Grace have added nicely here. I think the one thing I'll come back to is we're big fans of karmic capitalism. And so the notion of being able to have a compelling culture that you create that attracts incredibly great employees, then ultimately highly loyal customers that ultimately drives profitability. I think for us, what's been very helpful, even though, I personally had a purpose and a mission in founding the business, you can become distracted and come off that path at times, or you can be challenged. I think staying very close to your employees and your customers and what do they see in the opportunity, it's always a great reminder. And it's also a great source of implementation for every business of any size or scale or duration in terms of how long it's been around. I think I'm always surprised every time I have a chance to sit down with somebody who works in our company or sit down with a customer or a user of the technology. They're often a very easy reminder for why you're in this to begin with. So,
Well, I'll just close by saying that one thing that we talk a lot about in our programs is that, the difference between a business and a nonprofit is just a tax status. And ultimately, both should be driven with a higher purpose. And, one calls it profit at the end of the day, and the other calls it surplus and reinvests it into sustainability of impact for the next year. And I think, Grace, what you said at the end, that if you can just have companies thinking about how to solve, right? And then after they figure out what is the most creative solution, figuring out how do we make that profitable or sustainable, right? That would truly be an enlightened capitalism that allowed so many of these big issues to be solved and to build more durable companies like the ones that both you and Ashish have created. Because at the end of the day, when people look up and see those visionary leaders, they want to work for them, they want to buy from them, and they want to be part of the movement in a much more meaningful way that ultimately leads to the most sustainable value. So thank you for inspiring us. Dane, thank you for giving us the tools to put that inspiration into action. And thank you all for joining us. We look forward to future conversations with all of you and to seeing you live out this purpose in your efforts. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.